Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to my channel. Today I am doing yet another horror I've watched recently. I put one of these out a couple of weeks ago, and what I do in these videos is I just do like short reviews of movies that I've watched recently because most of them aren't worth taking up a whole video for. So I have 6 movies to talk about with you guys today, and the first 3 came out this year in 2020. The first one is Relic that came out this summer. Then I'll be talking about Host, which is a Shudder original, and then I'll be talking about Z, which is also a Shudder original. And then working backwards, up next is Countdown from 2019, then Rubber from 2010, and then finally Splice from 2009. This will be a spoiler-free video. I might want to talk about the ending of Relic and possibly Splice because there's some things that we need to discuss, but there will be timestamps for spoilers and when to skip ahead and all that good stuff, and there will also be timestamps for each movie that I talk about in case you only care about listening to one of them. Okay, so let's kick it off with Relic that came out this summer, and it received a 92% on Rotten Tomatoes. In Relic, a woman links her mother's increasingly volatile behavior to an evil presence at their family's decaying country home. So I'm going to start off with some fun facts as I always do for all of these movies, and then I'll get into my thoughts. This film premiered at the Sundance Film Festival on January 25th of this year, and then it was released to theaters on July 3rd. But not here, not in the US, nope, because the virus is still raging. Jake Gyllenhaal was actually a producer on this film, which I had no idea about, but good for him. Although they portray mother and daughter, Emily Mortimer is actually only 15 years older than Bella Heathcote. And finally, this movie uses sound effects to mimic sensorial and memory loss as described by dementia patients. Okay, so this movie is a weird one. It starts off pretty slow, and like I was a little bit bored. I was kind of like, what's happening? Where's this going? What is this, a horror movie? And then it got very disturbing, like very disturbing. One big key horror element in this movie is mold, which I really like because I've always thought, like, why has that never been done before? Well, they did it, and it was disgusting. Like, the practical and the special effects were really, really well done in this movie, and they were really gross. So I appreciated that, but honestly, other than that, like, the acting was really good, but this movie was just not really my style. It was definitely a more slow, artistic type of a vibe movie. It's kind of one of those, and I know that a lot of my subscribers aren't really into that kind of a thing, so I feel obligated to tell you, I don't think that most of you guys will really like this movie. I can't really say that I would recommend it. I think that the metaphorical imagery and how it relates to like dementia and all that stuff, it was really well done. Like, I'm not gonna say it's a bad film by any means, but I don't really think it's that enjoyable, honestly. I typically really appreciate more artistic films, but the fact that there were kind of only like only two jump scares already 30 minutes into the movie, I was like, what's happening? Like, it's just not a typical horror movie. I wouldn't really call it a horror movie, even though the ending and the imagery and everything is totally horrifying. It's confusing. I don't know what to call it. But the whole thing, rather than being horrifying, is just very uncomfortable, which I can appreciate to an extent, because this movie made me extremely uncomfortable, and I think that it was sort of the slow pace mixed with the tension between the characters. You don't really know why there is tension between the characters, but it's there and it's weird. The house is also very creepy on its own, so like there are good elements to the movie. It's pretty well written. Like, it's just not my cup of tea. I didn't really enjoy it. It also feels like a mixture of a lot of different movies because the mold was definitely an element that I felt was pretty unique, but this movie kind of felt like a combination of The Exorcist, I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House, and The Taking of Deborah Logan. Like, those 3 movies, I feel like if you mush them together and made a really weird little baby, that's what this film is. All right, I'm gonna move on to Host, which is a Shudder original movie, and this got a 92% on Google ratings. It hasn't been rated yet on Rotten Tomatoes. I don't know if Shudder just doesn't have that reach quite yet, but 92% of users on Google enjoyed this movie. In Host, a bunch of friends get together on a Zoom call during the coronavirus pandemic to try to summon spirits and talk to them and such like that, and of course everything goes awry. Not only does it have a 92% gifted to it by Google users, but it also has 5 schools on Shudder, so everyone on Shudder is loving it as well. And now for some fun facts. This movie was scripted, but the cast was actually allowed to improvise quite a bit during this movie. I believe this movie is only 54 minutes long, so it's a very short film as well, which I liked because I personally do like a good short film. Speaking of, this was based on a short film by the director Rob Savage that was done as a prank to his friends, where during a Zoom chat, he pretended to be attacked by something in his attic, but he didn't inform his friends about this in order to get their genuine reactions to it, and the video was released online and apparently went viral. Rob then approached Shudder about making it a full-length version. And finally, parts of the script were actually redacted so that the cast wouldn't know what was gonna happen next to get their genuine reactions. So I feel like this movie is being talked about quite a lot right now because everyone is just loving it, and if you haven't seen it yet, then like, please take all that with a grain of salt. I feel like the hype was a bit much and low-key ruined the movie for me a little bit. Because I was like, wow, this is being written as it's during the coronavirus pandemic, like we're all living this right now, this is something we can all relate to, and it has to do with horror, like people whip this up real quick, and here we have it, we have a story about the current times. Absolutely. But then I watched it. I feel like I might get crucified for not really liking this movie because so many people loved it and are just gushing about it all over the internet. But to be honest, the only original element that I could see in the movie was just the fact that it was taking place during current times during the COVID pandemic. Everything else, like the way that it's filmed only on the computer and it's found footage style, you know, that's been done before. Most of the jump scares and all the horror elements, that had all been done before. I just didn't really feel like I was watching anything new. It's not bad by any means, like I think it's enjoyable, it's just I didn't really see a ton of creativity. Like obviously it's creative in that someone realized, hey, this is all going on right now, this is a great opportunity for a horror film because COVID is horrifying, we're all using Zoom now, it's very relatable. Like I think it's a smart movie. I just didn't see a lot of unique or original elements in it, and so it wasn't my favorite. So to conclude, I guess I shouldn't have said that I didn't really like this movie because I did. I was just really underwhelmed after all of the hype. So I will recommend it to you guys, just try not to get swept up by all the hype. It's just lower your expectations like a little bit. All right, now I'm gonna be moving on to the Shudder original Z that also came out this year, and I'm reviewing this movie because I got a comment, so a little quick comment shout out. Bloodbath TV commented on my video and said, next Wednesday, can you review Z? It's on Shudder. So yes, I can, and here we are. Now what happens in Z is that a family finds themselves terrorized by their 8-year-old son's imaginary friend. This movie is also not rated on Rotten Tomatoes. I guess it's just Shudder movies that don't get rated right away. I'm not really sure, but it got a 5.6 out of 10 on IMDb. This movie stars Keegan Connor Tracy as the lead. She plays the young boy's mother, and you would probably recognize her from Final Destination 2, among other shows and movies. She's not super high profile, but she's a really good actress. They also somehow got Sarah Canning in this movie. She plays Aunt Jenna in Vampire Diaries, and her name in this movie is also Jenna. Now I received a DM recommending this movie to me, so when I was watching it with my dad, I wasn't actually really taking notes because I was just watching it for enjoyment. So after the movie was over, I thought I would jot down a few notes, like just in case I wanted to talk about it or just in case someone else wanted me to talk about it. But all I wrote down was, I was into it at first, it got really strange. Yeah, so I don't really have any notes to go off of, so I'm just kind of going off of memory right now. But this movie did scare me. I will say that the first half of the movie is a lot stronger than the latter half. In the latter half, some strange occurrences occur, and the plot felt like it got a little bit messy. Like, I understood what was going on, but the plot just wasn't really that strong. In the first half of the movie, it really was because you don't really know what's going on. But then in the second half, as you start to figure out just exactly what this imaginary friend is and the backstory behind that, it's like interesting, but the execution wasn't great, so I wasn't that interested in it. I was entertained, like from start to end. I think it's an entertaining movie. They certainly didn't have a big budget, so it's not like the most well executed by any means, but I think it's still enjoyable. I also was scared at a couple points in this movie. There were a couple jump scares where I either had to look away or I jumped 10 feet in the air, so the jump scares in this movie were very effective. So if you're not really in it for the plot, but you're there for the scares and the creepy elements and stuff, I think this movie definitely has it. But if you're a plot heavy person such as myself, I don't really know that you'll like it. And also if you don't have Shudder, then you can't watch it. Same goes for Host, so I'm sorry. I do think it's one of the stronger original movies that Shudder has put out. I haven't watched a ton of them though. I think that the next one I want to watch that's a Shudder original is The Beach House, because I somehow still haven't seen that despite a bunch of people talking about it and saying that they really like it. So I don't have a ton to say about this movie. I think a lot of people will appreciate this movie for various reasons. Like as a whole, it's not fantastic, but there are a lot of elements that are really good. Like the acting is really good, a lot of the horror elements are really good, the jump scares worked for me, so there's a lot going for it. Basically, my final thoughts are, if you have Shudder, try this movie out, why not? Okay, moving on to Countdown, that came out in 2019 and received a 26% on Rotten Tomatoes. When a nurse downloads an app that claims to predict exactly when a person is going to die, it tells her she only has 3 days to live. With time ticking away and a figure haunting her, she must find a way to save her life before time runs out. So this movie was really highly anticipated by myself because I thought that the concept was really good, it looked really good, I was excited for it, but it wasn't in theaters for very long because it got really bad reviews and then I totally forgot about it. But the other day, one of the horror groups that I'm in on Facebook was having a watch party, and so I got to watch the whole thing for free, and that was sick. So let's get into the fun facts and then I'll get into my opinions. The app featured in this movie actually exists, and it's owned by the production studio that made this movie, and it was used as a marketing tool. I feel like I remember when it was coming out, like the app was used to promote the film, but I feel like I heard people talking about the app and having the app, but I don't really remember. Some of the places in the abandoned hospital in this film were actually filmed in the same place as Teen Wolf, which if there are any Teen Wolf fans out there you go. I've literally never seen a single episode of that show, but some of these locations include the locker room and the hallways, and they're literally identical to the show apparently. But my favorite fun fact, well, it's not really a fun fact, it's just he acts in this movie. Carlisle is in this movie. And the girl from You, the girl who plays Beck. But she's kind of whatever. Carlisle is in this movie. He plays a really gross doctor. I was happy to see him. But I'm gonna keep it short with this movie as well because honestly, it's not really worth seeing. The teens in the prologue of this movie are like really stereotypical. They're really poorly written. Most of the dialogue is pretty poorly written. The plot is, I wouldn't say it's a mess. Like the plot makes sense, but the execution was just really bad and honestly really goofy. This kind of felt like a dark comedy at times, even though sometimes it was really serious. A lot of the times it was very goofy, but it might just be because it was like cheesy. So this movie was giving me strange vibes. Like I found it enjoyable because there were high profile actors in it. It was well made, it looked good, but at the end of the day, I'm not really gonna recommend it to you guys. There is a storyline of our main character and she's been sexually harassed by her boss. And without giving spoilers, Karma does pay a visit, and that was very good to see. So that was one of the positive elements of the movie. And then the acting, of course, was pretty good because it's Carlisle and Beck, who we love. So it was good to see them. But other than that, like the jump scares, all the horror elements, they felt very PG, like not even scary enough to be PG-13. It felt very PG and just not good. Honestly though, I kind of enjoyed this story. Like I said, the plot was honestly pretty good. It was coherent, like I understood what was going on. There's some sort of biblical stuff that I wasn't like that interested in, but our main character and her storyline with this man sexually harassing her and stuff, and like her relationship with her sister, like that stuff is good, and I think that's well written. So it's enjoyable. Like I know I said I wouldn't recommend it, but if it's free anywhere online, honestly throw it on when you're with your friends and just laugh at it and like point out all the stupid stuff. Because some horror movies are just really good for that. Like they don't have to be good stories or good movies or whatever. You can just throw them on to laugh at and they're still really enjoyable. So that's what this is, but that being said, there's not a ton to break down, not a lot to talk about with this movie, so I am gonna move on. Let's move on to Rubber, that came out in 2010 and received a 69% on Rotten Tomatoes. Before I get into the synopsis and fun facts and anything, weirdest, most pointless movie I've ever seen. I only watched it because I thought, wow, how ridiculous. This would be great for me to review because it's so weird and so dumb. And it was basically what I expected, but almost worse. And I wish I hadn't spent the time watching the movie, honestly. It's an hour and a half of my life I will not get back. So you must be wondering what happens in Rubber. A car tire comes to life with the power to make people explode and goes on a murderous rampage through the California desert. Yup, like I said, one of the weirdest movies ever. Let me get into my fun facts. One of the spectators in this movie, and I'll get into what I'm talking about in a minute, but one of them is played by Daniel Quinn, who also starred in a movie called Scanner Cop, and in that movie, he had the ability to blow up people's heads with his mind, much like the tire in this movie. This film was also mostly made with practical effects with hardly any CGI at all, and Quentin Dupieux is the writer, director, cinematographer, editor, and composer of this movie, which makes sense to me because I feel like it'd be really hard to get a team of people together to make this movie because of its absurdity. Now I'm gonna talk about the opening of this film. I'm not really gonna get into the plot because Well, honestly, there not really is much of a plot. Like, you heard the synopsis, that's basically all that happens, but a lot of other really, really weird elements come into play as well, so I'm just gonna tell you guys about the opening of the movie. So in the opening scene, we're in the desert, and this cop car rolls up, and there's a bunch of chairs set up for like no reason, and the cop just like slowly rolls up, and he just like runs into all the chairs and just knocks them all over. Then he parks, and he gets out of the car, and he comes, and he looks straight at the camera, and he's breaking the fourth wall. Then he goes on to talk about like E.T. and a couple other movies, and like, why did this happen? Well, why did that happen? If that happened, why did this happen? Why do we do anything?
In the Steven Spielberg movie E.T., why is the alien brown?
Everything is pointless, so like, why not make an homage to the no reason?
Because life itself is filled with no reason. The film you are about to see today is an homage to the no reason.
For why, I don't know. The budget of this movie also is $500,000. Why someone would spend that much money making this movie when that movie could have gone to like charity, the environment, hungry people, the homeless, I don't know. But they chose to make this movie instead. So getting on with the opening scene of this movie. So Jat Plotnik stars in this movie, which I don't know where I recognize him from, but I recognize him from somewhere. His character is handing out binoculars and stuff to this big group of people, and they're all out in the desert, and he gives them binoculars so they can spectate and watch the movie with us. So they're like watching all the events taking place from a distance. Like, us and this group of people are kind of collectively watching the movie together. It's very weird. But that's basically all I'm gonna get into for the opening scene, because I feel like just hearing that alone, you can start to understand how just bizarre this movie is. There's some like comedy that kind of works. It's honestly kind of boring. Like, I was having trouble not looking at my phone while I was watching the movie, and I don't have a ton to say because from what you've heard, like, this movie just, it doesn't make sense. It's pointless. I don't recommend it, but you can find it for free online. I'll link it down below if anybody at all is interested. The only reason I would recommend this movie is if you feel like you've truly seen it all, like you've seen all the horror you possibly could at this point. You're just dying for something different, something unique, or like something new to watch. I guess watch this movie. Or if you like absurdity and you're just really curious after me explaining this movie to you and now you feel like you have to watch it. Honestly, I'm kind of that way. If I had heard someone else saying this is the weirdest, most freaky movie ever, I would probably want to watch it. But I'm warning you, like, life is short and an hour and a half is a long time to waste. So just bear that in mind. All right, I'm gonna move on. The final movie I'm gonna talk about in this video is Splice from 2009. This just got released to Netflix and it received a 76% on Rotten Tomatoes. Clive and Elsa specialize in creating hybrids of species. When they propose the use of human DNA, their pharmaceutical company bosses forbid it, forcing them to conduct their experiments in secret. The result is Dren, a creature with amazing intelligence and physical attributes. At first, Dren exceeds their wildest dreams, but as she begins to grow at an accelerated rate, she threatens to become their worst nightmare. Now for my fun facts, this movie was produced by Guillermo del Toro, who wrote and directed The Shape of Water, which is a pretty similar movie to this one. Vincenzo Natali, the writer and director of this movie, got the idea for this film when he saw a mouse with a human ear on its back. Adrian Brody and Sarah Polley were Vincenzo's first and only choices for Clive and Elsa. He also wanted to make this film directly after his very successful film Cube, but technology hadn't reached the point that he felt it needed to make this film, and so he shelved it for 10 years. And finally, in 2008, he felt the time had finally come, and then this came out in 2009. On that note, if you've seen my review of Halloween 3, I said something very similar to this because I thought that movie was way too ambitious for the 80s. I thought that they should have waited, but you know, if they make a remake now, I think it'll be a lot more successful. Anyways, both actresses who played Dren, the child Dren and the adult Dren, both had to shave their head for this movie, which I wouldn't have done. I would say put a bald cap on me. The two spliced organisms in the beginning of this movie are named Fred and Ginger, and they are named after Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, two famous singers back in the day. Okay, now onto my opinions about this freaky movie. I think this will be the only movie that I actually talk about spoilers with, but I'm gonna talk about general opinions first, so you're safe for a little bit. So starting off with the general vibe of the movie, I really like the coloring. There was a lot of blues and some greens. It was just like a nice, relaxing, soothing movie to watch visually. And you can definitely tell it's produced by Guillermo del Toro because it looks very similar to The Shape of Water. It also has a highly interesting concept. I really like the idea of mixing human and animal DNA to make this really weird and crazy monster. Because I'm a very big fan of creature features. If you've been on my channel for a while, you know this. But this movie took a very bad turn, and I'll get into that in a minute, but let me just give you some more general thoughts and my recommendations. To sum sum it up, this movie is basically like a car wreck. Like, it's something that you can't help but look at because of morbid curiosity. And it's not really gory, it's just other very disturbing things happen. And it's hard to look away, but like you really, really want to. And I know you're probably wondering why I found it so disturbing, but I have to wait till spoilers to get into it because like it's just a really, really big part of the plot, so I can't give that away. I'm struggling with whether or not I would recommend this movie. I am personally never gonna watch this again. Like, it's made that list because of the super, super disturbing elements and like the general goings on of this movie. Just not for me. Like, the first half of the movie I was very much on board with, but then other events transpire and things start to go downhill. And I won't say it's a bad movie. It's really well paced. There's some good action. Like, it's exciting. Very, very interesting things happen. It's a very interesting plot. You can't really tear your eyes away from it. So like, for that reason, I think it's a good movie, but at the same time, like, no, it's not. So proceed with caution. It's on Netflix. Watch at your own peril. And that's about it. I'm gonna get into the spoilers now because I can't help it. So bestiality. Holy God, I was not ready for that. Like, I don't know what it is about Del Toro and working on or writing movies that involve bestiality and like humans having sex with monsters. But there it is. I hated it. I hate that there was also a rape scene with this monster raping Elsa. Hated that. But speaking of the sex scene with Clive and Dren, I do have a fun fact about that. So the sex scene between Dren and Clive was cut down and much of the material was removed as the explicitness of the sex was panned by the critics in the test projections. Sorry, I needed a moment because you mean to tell me that it was even worse than what we saw in the movie and they had to cut it down? I'm pretty sure that what we saw was very explicit. Like, I would have even cut that down. To each their own and like how much they enjoy sex and horror movies and stuff, but that was just full on bestiality. Like, he was cheating on his partner with this creature that was grafted with his partner's DNA and a bunch of animals. Like he was basically her dad too. Can we discuss? No, you know what? No, I don't want to discuss it. But yeah, he was basically her dad. He raised her and then he had sex with her. And then she turned into a he and then he raped Elsa. A mess. A mess. My mom just got home and brought me frozen yogurt, which is amazing because I've been filming all day and my throat hurts. Okay, on that note, I'm gonna wrap it up here. I don't really have any more thoughts about Splice. It's well acted, it's well written, it's well paced, it's really well done aside from the stuff I just talked about. You won't be able to look away from it, so I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of recommending it because honestly, I don't want to be the only person that's seen this movie, so maybe go watch it, then come back to my video and type what you think about it. Let me know in the comments down below. But anyways, that does it for this video. I'm gonna sign off and eat my frozen yogurt now. I post to this channel 3 days a week on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and I post once a week generally on my vlog channel, so that's a lot of new content every single week. I currently have a Halloween series going on right now, and my Friday the 13th series is coming to an end on Friday this week. But not to worry because my Nightmare on Elm Street series is coming right after that. Also follow me on social media. On Instagram, I always update you guys on what movie I'm watching that day, and I also have like a horror tab on my Instagram that I update with just other horror related news or like horror items that I've bought recently, like when I get new DVDs and stuff like that. Please check out the petitions and the GoFundMes link down below. I update those every single week. I hope that you enjoyed this video and that I catch you in the next one. Bye!